Welcome to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. Join us as we dive into the world of endurance sports, exploring everything from nutrition to training and how these elements shape your everyday life, both on and off the race course. Hosted by Coach Justin, certified run and triathlon coach and owner of Tabula Rasa Racing, along with Coach Katie, a registered dietitian specializing in sports nutrition and owner of Fuel to Run. We're here to share insights and real-world advice to help you thrive on your journey. Here at the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast is where your journey begins. Welcome, everyone, to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. I'm your host, Coach Justin. I'm here with Coach Katie, and this is episode 36. I want to welcome you guys. Today, our topic is base fitness, how to maintain fitness throughout your off season, or what are some of the things that you can do during your quote-unquote off season to either maintain fitness or improve holes that are in your fitness to prepare you for the next season coming up. So we'll start with just a few housekeeping. Wanted to, again, welcome any new listeners. We also have our Endurance Athlete Journey podcast group on Facebook, which is a private group. All you got to do is just go out there and answer one question. Think of something about what do you like about the podcast or something like that. And we'll let you right on in. We're trying to build a community of endurance athletes where we can all learn and support each other and open communication with the listeners and us. It'll be a place for additional content once we start to build the community a little bit more, and a good place to voice your thoughts on topics that you would like for us to cover, or like Q&A sessions, things like that. Both of us are taking on athletes onto our rosters. So if you're thinking about 2026 already, and so it's October now, so you just have a few more months left of the year. But if you're starting to think about what you want to achieve next year, new goals, new races, or just different approaches to training, both Katie and I are taking on athletes, so you can reach out to Katie at fuel2run.com, or you can reach out to me, Coach Justin, at tabularasaracing.com. Katie works with nutrition for all sports, as well as runners. I coach mainly multi-sport, but if you're interested in just cycling, swimming, running, endurance hiking, anything like that, those are my areas of expertise. But Katie deals more with the nutrition for all sports. Or if you would like to tag team, you can reach out to me and I'll coach you, and then Katie can manage your nutrition aspect, and you can have a fantastic team to get you through 2026. So a little pat on the back there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's just jump right in. I think that's kind of like all of the housekeeping things that we've got. So Katie, how have you been?
I'm doing really well. Yeah, we were talking a little bit off air, but I did a 5K this morning, and my goal was to run under 19 minutes. And I've been training, doing a lot of kind of speed work, and I was able to do that in about 18:30. So which is great. I'm like thinking to myself, well, if it was at sea level, it would be, and then you could get age graded. I'm like, wow, I've been like a 17 something. But it was, I don't know that stuff. I don't know if I count that all, but it's like 18. It was like 18:28 or something, which was a little bit of a surprise to me. I've been pleasantly surprised the last few races, so that's always encouraging. And also that I'm older now and supposedly sort of past my prime in running, and I feel like because of things I'm doing, taking care of my sleep and recovery, making sure my easy days are easy and my training days are, the optimized. I'm feeling like that's really helping me. So there's definitely some things that I wish 20 years ago, 20 years ago, I had been doing, because I'm like, what would I have been able to accomplish if I had known, if I had implemented this back then, but you can't think in the past. You just got to kind of move forward. And I'm just excited, and I'm excited what that might mean for next year as I move back into my marathon build. So I've been able to kind of increase my speed a bit, get a bit faster in the 5K. So I'm hoping that helps as I then sort of build into some endurance for next. That's kind of a little bit of what we're talking about, is that, how to kind of maintain in the off season, but then how to build that into my next marathon build, which will be for grandmas in June. I'm excited. Today was a busy day. I have wet hair because I did the 5K. We went to breakfast. I came home. I got a grocery delivery, put that away, had some lunch, went to the pool with my son, and then we just got back. It's like I'm kind of running like I'm like still kind of in this like running on like I don't know, not adrenaline, but just a little bit of that like busy, fumes, and then after this I'll probably crash. But yeah.
Yeah.
How are you doing, Justin? Any updates on your training? How are things going?
Doing well. So now that you mention it, so I wanted to say that on Tuesdays we're releasing bonus casts, and it's my weekly video or my weekly episode talking about my prep for Ironman Florida 70.3. So now we are all caught up. So it'll just be that one release on Tuesday and then our normal content on Thursday. But things are going well. This is kind of the next week I'll bump up in volume, and then it will kind of stay that way for the rest of the plan. So I'm about halfway through the plan today. This week is like week 8, and so it's a 16-week plan. So today was nice. It was a nice solid day of training. I literally just like came home, took a shower, ate a sandwich, and then jumped on to record this podcast. So I'm a little bit in the same boat as you, where we're just kind of just rolling through on adrenaline and caffeine, and then all of a sudden, probably later after dinner, I'll probably crash as well. But this week I celebrated my 3-year wedding anniversary to Stephanie.
Congrats.
And so we have dinner reservations tonight.
So we gotta keep this one,
Yeah, so we got to keep this rolling. So we got 60 minutes to talk about this, but I don't particularly care for seafood, but Stephanie loves it. And as a loving and supporting husband, we are having seafood tonight for dinner. So
I love seafood.
I'll figure out something. But
They
anyway.
they often have like steak options or other things at the seafood restaurants,
Yeah.
don't they? So you'll be able to find something, I'm sure. But it's
I'm
yeah.
not a fan of seafood, but I'll eat it, if it's the only
Yeah,
thing
yeah.
that's available. So I try. I know that you've given me salmon and stuff in my meals, and I
Get the
try
whole
to
thing.
really kind of broaden my horizons, but that's what's going
Yeah.
on. So
I like seafood, but I'm a little bit picky about it because living in Colorado, it's just hard to get fresh seafood unless it's like trout, straight out of the river or something like that. So it's not usually very good. And so whenever I'm like in the East Coast or when we were in Maine, that's all I ate was like seafood because if it's a few days old or like shipped out here to Colorado, it's not super fresh sometimes. And if you want to get it real nice and fresh, it's expensive. So I don't
yeah,
have it very often. But yeah, well, I'm sure you'll find something that you'll like
there'll
on
be
the
something on the
menu.
menu,
There'll be something.
some kind of carbohydrate that I can probably
Some
that I can eat
pasta or
after
something. Yeah.
training today.
After your
So
long training ride and
yeah,
run or whatever you did. Yeah. So, all right. Well, so our topic today, I don't even know, did we mention we did base training
yeah,
or off
base
season
training.
training? So I guess like I'm curious, well, first of all, do you want to jump into like what is our, like when we're talking about the off season, or some people maybe kind of reference base training, although that may be a little bit of a separate thing. How do you define like because I'm thinking people think off season and they think, oh, I'm gonna take like 2 months off or something, and that's not what we're talking about.
No, but that is an approach that some people use. It kind of depends on how consistent you are throughout the year. I have an athlete that I work with, and it's training plan time, so I send out a message. I put a message out there on Training Peak saying, hey, tell me your availability that's coming up. And I know he's got a trip that's coming up next week, but he sent me a text and he's like, I'm traveling next week, I'll be here for business, but on November I want an open plan, which basically means I give him the freedom to do whatever he wants each day. If he wants to do something, he can do it. He knows the guardrails that we set up, so he doesn't like go out and like run a half marathon with no training. But within reason. But he has the freedom to kind of pick and choose what he wants to do, how much of it he wants to do. And the reason that he said, he's like, I just need a break. So there are times where if you're like super consistent and you just need kind of like a mental reprieve from training, this is a good time of year to do that. you also have the holidays that are rolling in. So some people get busier with different parties and activities and things like that, trips, to go see family and things. So sometimes it's easier to have that relaxation for November and December to allow for that.
Mhm.
I see that there is value in taking it quote unquote easy or a little bit less structured, during like November or December. Personally, I don't. I like the structure and I like to have a direction that I'm moving. So I don't do well in that kind of scenario. But
Where you
there
don't have
are
any
people
structure, you're
that do.
just whatever you wake
Yeah,
up in the
if
morning, you're like, "I'm gonna whatever
yeah,
I feel like today is."
yeah,
Yeah, I don't do
that's
that well.
not me.
I
I don't
can
do
do that,
well
but I
under that.
don't I have done that before, so I can't say I don't do well because, like, when I was coming back like, before I started really seriously training again, that's kind of what my, like, training plan consisted of. I would just run and just do whatever I felt like, and I actually did
Yeah.
go out, but I wasn't super consistent. I mean, I would, but but I would still go out and do stuff and run. And when I had time, if I had time, I'd go out, and it wasn't every day, but it was like that. And so I couldn't say I don't do that or I've never done that. But now that I'm back and I have like some serious goals, I don't think I could just be like, oh, I'm going to kind of wake up but honestly, I do. There's a little bit of that I build into my plan probably in December where I'm focusing a lot on strength training. So I'll have things built into my schedule. So it's not that I don't have anything. It's just that the running portion is a little less structured. So I might have like one day where I do something speed wise or like some strides or run and hill sprints or something just to kind of keep up some of my fitness. But then the other days, I might have a little bit more leniency of like, okay, no, I'm going to do my strength training session, but the run is kind of up in the air a little bit. Like, I know I want to run, but it might be a mile, it might be 5. I'm just going to kind of like let it happen the way it happens. And it will, maybe depend on the weather. So I don't like to put a lot of pressure, especially because I know when marathon training comes up, there's going to be a lot of more rigidity to it. And I have to kind of complete the miles I want to complete, for the most part. So but it's not as though I'm just willy-nilly totally, like, it's like there's a structure to the part of the training that I'm focusing on, which is going to be a big strength component, and then the running will be there, it's just that's gonna be what's a little bit less structured. So, I guess for me, there's a little bit of a combo, both in a way, if that makes sense. So, I don't
Yeah.
know.
I look at the quote unquote off season. There are three kind of like approaches that I would say are common. One approach is no structure, where you just kind of do what you would like to do, especially if you're doing things like if you're training for a marathon or you're training for a full Ironman. That's a long commitment to make, and so sometimes you have sacrificed other things that you like to do because you didn't have the ability to get it in at the same time in order to get the volume that you needed for whatever race that you're training for. It's also a great, for instance, I do enjoy hiking and things like that, but I can't get that in, during my quote unquote training plan season where I'm actively training for a race. So after Florida, I'm going to enjoy like maybe a few weeks of some downtime where it's a little less structured, even though I will produce a plan for me but I'm going to throw in some things that I don't normally have the ability to do. That could be, instead of, a long swim, I may say, hey, I'm going to go out to the local park and I'm going to, do a, hour and a half walk out on the trails, something like that. Spend a little bit more time on the gravel bike, since most of my time is spent on the road bike, and, I can bundle up, I don't mind the cold. So I just kind of bundle up and just go out there and ride. So that's one approach that
Right.
you can take.
Yeah, I
The second,
ski, like, I like to go
yeah,
skiing in the winter, and so it's trying to build in a little bit of flexibility so I can go skiing, even though I know that's a little like, could be a bit risky potentially, but, yeah, I think that that's totally and because my race isn't until June, I think I can build that in and still be able to, as I'm ramping up my mileage, kind of build that in and still be able to do it. I just may not wanna go hit the moguls real hard or something where I could potentially injure. I don't want to go off any jumps, I'm not going to go ripping down the mountain and tearing and jumping and going on in the park and all that stuff that
Yeah.
because that's what I usually do. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, I like to ski and I do stuff, but it's not, but that's probably not the best idea. But I still want to get out there and do other types of activities like that. And I think that's totally okay. And you can build that into your plan. But then once March hits for me, I probably won't, that's kind of spring skiing time, but I probably won't be skiing at that point in my training plan because I'll be ramping it up and it gets a little too risky to be trying to get the mileage I want to hit and be going, skiing. So yeah, I think that's another example of something, all those sports sort of things. The only ones I kind of would maybe caution people, I mean, you can do this in the off season, but I think some of the more risky, like team sports, like basketball or some of those sports are probably a little bit like hockey, and that's great, but I think those are a little bit more risky in terms of injury. So you kind of have to like do those types of things at your own risk because, but that's probably better to do in the off season. But then again, if you get injured because of it, then you might not be able to make it in, when you might not be healthy once you get to your training. So I think that'd be the only caveat, but some people still do, team sports or other things like that too. But anyway.
Yeah. The second approach that I would say is more of foundation, laying a more solid foundation. So it could be one of the approaches that I think that I'm going to be looking at is spending more time in the weight room. So, training for Florida, I've been able to do 3 days in the weight room, but the method that I've used is more of a muscular endurance approach rather than trying to generate power. So once January rolls around, I may switch that method now and focus more on power generation, lifting heavier, fewer reps, that type of thing. So I'm trying to build a more solid foundation that I can then lay the aerobic component on top of it when that starts to ramp up.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the second approach that I would say is more foundation building. The third one that I would say is probably common is where you're filling holes in your fitness that you discovered during your season. So if you're a triathlete and you found that, you said, I really would like to be a faster runner, or I would like to increase my FTP on the bike, or I really would like to fine tune my swim stroke to become more efficient to where I can either swim at the same pace with less effort or to increase my speed in the water. Then this is the time of the year where you would focus on those. So if you're saying, hey, I want to increase my FTP, then, of the total time budget that you have in your training plan is going to be bike heavy, which means that you may have to sacrifice, things like running and swimming. You may say, hey, out of the 7 days, I'm going to be on the bike 5 of those days. Some of those are going to be like high intensity stuff. Then I've got my long ride. So that means that I may run only like 2 or 3 times a week, because you want to try and maintain a little bit of run fitness, a little bit of feel for the way that the foot makes contact with the ground. And so I would say run no less than 3 days per week if you can. 2 is kind of like, that's kind of pushing it a little bit to where you might start to see some degradation in performance when it's time to really kind of like ramp things up. Because then when the season starts and you've only been running twice a week, and now you're going to try and run, 4 and 5 times a week, that can be a little bit risky because the muscles and the tendons and joints aren't used to that kind of impact, that you spent several months doing something else. But, if you're focusing on bike, that may kind of offset some of that risk because you're still building the cardiovascular engine and you're still building some strength in your knees and your hips, and your glutes are still firing on the bike. You're still building, a little bit of ankle strength, but it's not as much, but, it's still something. So I would say, run no less than 3 times a week. I would say swim no less than twice a week, because you can lose feel for the water really, really quickly. And so, I would try and stick in like 2 swims, maybe 3 runs, and then spend the rest of the time, on the bike getting stronger and building FTP. That's just one example that you can do. That's still kind of like a hefty load.
Mhm.
So you kind of say, hey, if I can't run 3 times a week, then I'll just run twice. I'm not doing any kind of long runs because it's absolutely not necessary, and actually a bad decision if you're only running like 2 or 3 times a week to throw in a long run. What I would typically do is, if you're only running 3 times a week, I would take your total run volume and just divide it by 3 and have each run be the same duration. Or, if you do your training plan in miles, just have those same miles. Keep it kind of like zone 2, maybe a little bit of, tempo efforts that are in there, just to kind of like shock things up a little bit, keep it fresh. But I would not do, things like long runs and, speed work and all that kind of stuff. You don't have the volume to support that kind of demand. So, but that's my personal opinion. That's how I would approach it.
Right.
How would you, if somebody came to you, Katie, what would you have them do?
Like if they were in what sort of scenario? Like if they were kind
So
of
let's say
looking
that
to run
you
or
have a triathlete that comes to you, but they want to come to you to build run fitness. They found that that's their weakest component of their triathlon.
yeah, I wonder.
And so they say,
Yeah,
hey, can you help me build my run? Clearly, you're going to tell them, well, I don't really work with triathletes, so I'm not going to really be able to. I'm not going to
like be able
give you
to
very
give
many
you the other workout.
bike and swims,
Yeah,
but I can help you build your
run.
run.
Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously, then I
How
would
would you go about working with them?
probably work with them like any other runner, but maybe just kind of have some room in their plan to do like a bike a couple times a week and maybe a swim or so, just depending on what they had. So it'd be like, okay, well, maybe you can't run 7 days a week, but can you run 5 days? Because you're going to want to be running a
Yeah.
little bit more, just like you said with the bike. And then it would be something similar, but I would probably have them, it depends on what they were kind of wanting to accomplish. Like if it was increasing speed, or if it was like their endurance is in the run is bad, not as good. So maybe they're somewhat speedy, but they can't, they can't run the entire Ironman for the Ironman. They want to run the entire marathon portion or something like that. It might be more dependent. So it'd be like maybe building in some longer runs in that time frame, and helping them work on their endurance. Or if it was speed, it would be maybe working on some speed, getting them a little bit faster, like kind of building in like almost like a 5 or 10K, like let's work on getting that speed, improving that during that time. So kind of depends on what they would want to focus on and what their weakness is. But it would be almost like just writing them just a typical kind of run training plan, just knowing that they're kind of depending on their schedule, and then knowing that they're a triathlete. So they're probably going to need to also continue doing some biking and swimming. So then it's like a conversation about, well, can you do 4 or 5 days of running? And then, or there might be a couple days you're going to have to do 2 different things, like, which they're probably used to if they're triathlete anyways. And yeah, I think that's kind of how I would approach that, because I have some athletes, like I have actually not triathletes, but I have someone doing like high rocks, and they were wanting to like a high rocks competition, and they're wanting to improve their 10K time. So, because it's the 10K they're running in that. So they want to improve their 10K, and then so they can run faster within the high rocks. So I don't do as much training in like that discipline of the high rocks, but I'm helping this person like build in some running, speed work and some other running components in, so that they can become faster. Right. So it's kind of that, that's something I definitely can do. And that's kind of what her focus is. I don't know if she's necessarily doing base training. I think she's just trying to get to this high rocks competition in maybe January or February somewhere in Texas. I'm not sure, but yeah, so it's just, I mean, that's kind of how I would approach that. For like a runner though, somebody that just is running, and that's, I think, also something to think about, is like, what do you, as a runner, maybe you're not doing all the other disciplines, so you're not trying to focus on getting better at that one sport. You're just trying to get better at something within running. I think that's just asking yourself similar, like, what is your weakness in running? Like, are you doing ultras and you're just like, you don't have the muscular, you're fatiguing early, you don't have the muscular endurance to like get through. Like, well, maybe you focus on sort of something with strength training or building in some sort of strength component into the runs, hills, like, doing some sort of repeats of uphill running and strength training. And there's lots of things you can kind of build into that to maybe improve that. Or maybe they want to improve their speed. Like I've been kind of doing is, I wouldn't say this is my base training, but I've kind of gone through a whole phase of training that's really been nice because it's been a break from marathon training where I've just focused predominantly on speed. I'm still doing some long runs and I'm still going to continue to do long runs throughout this, but they're not 20 miles. My long runs are like 10 to 12. So I maintain some sort of level of endurance as well, but and that way I'm ready to go. But it's like I'm focusing right now on speed, and then I'm actually going to focus on strength, just like you're saying, is building that foundation. So I recommend that actually highly for most of my runners, because most runners, I say, would be one of their weaknesses would probably be power and
Yeah.
strength. And
Yep.
I honestly think that's probably one of the reasons why I've been able to maintain some of my times and the speed I have is because of that strength. So to me, it's very important now to go back and build in some strength so I can become more powerful, have that strength, have that foundation so that when I get to my marathon build, I'm strong and that will help me prevent injury. And then I kind of go into a maintenance with strength training where I just maintain my strength and build in the volume again. But yeah, that's kind of maybe a little bit of how I would approach that with someone is kind of figuring out what do you need? Yeah, what can you focus on now that maybe changes it up a little bit, like strength training. It's kind of something totally different. I think it's fun, but not everybody does. So the other thing I'm doing is I'm going to do, we talked a little bit about CrossFit last time. I'm actually going to sign up for a few months CrossFit gym. I'm going to do occasionally maybe a WOD, but they have some high rocks focused training. And I did a high rocks training session with this gym a couple weeks ago. And it was like the most fun. I loved it. You run and then you do something else. And then you run and then you do so. It's like, it breaks it up. And it was like 40 minutes and I'm just having a blast the entire time. So I'm like, okay, this is going to be great for me to sort of switch it up, do something different. Maybe it's helping me with my running, but maybe it's just giving me something different to do that gets me so that when I actually do have to go to my training for the marathon, maybe I'm excited because I'm like ready because I've done something a little bit
Yeah.
different, right? So that's another, yeah, I don't know. I have no idea if maybe there's some benefit to doing some CrossFit type workouts. Maybe doing the high rocks has a benefit to my running. At this point, it's just fun. So I'm that's part of important too, I think. So, that's kind of a little bit of a snippet of what I'm going to be up to. But yeah, I mean, I think if you can find things that you're still doing something to be fit, right? You're still maintaining your fitness, but it's different and fun, like whether it's a workout you sign up for at the gym, like I'm not necessarily saying you have to do high rocks workouts, but it's just switches it up. You're still running. I mean, whatever I did that day was still hard. And it was like at the end, I mean, my heart rate was going for 40 minutes straight, kind of probably in zone 3 or 4 sometimes, but I enjoyed it a lot. So I think that's also an important piece of it is trying to kind of do some things that keep it fun and kind of especially if you've been feeling a little burnt out by your season, something that kind of ignites your passion, to keep going at them. So I don't know, what are your thoughts? Like, do you ever have athletes that kind of switch gears like that and do something still fitness based, but just kind of different? I know that maybe kind of also aligns with like doing other sport, like we mentioned, but I don't know.
Yeah, a lot of my athletes probably won't do that, mainly because triathletes already have like 3 sports that they can kind of pick from. So, they will typically like pick one of those to kind of focus on.
Right.
And so, one thing that I would recommend then is if you're going into your off season and you feel like you want to work on one of the components, but you really do not enjoy that thing. So let's
Like
say it's swimming, which
Me.
that's most of what people just like do not enjoy as a triathlete, especially in wintertime. You're going from cold and you're trying to get them into the pool, and it's like you're driving there. And it's like pulling
Well, if they
teeth
have a hot
sometimes.
tub, then it's okay for me.
Yeah.
But
But if you're picking a sport or an activity that you don't enjoy, but you're picking it because you feel like it's your major weakness, then I caution, because you're not going to enjoy that time that you're working on it. And so I would say I would give that some serious thought and say, hey, I know that this is kind of your weakness, but are you really willing to spend the next 2 to 3 months doing something that you really don't enjoy all that much? It's gonna make it even harder to do. So sometimes you say, well, hey, I love the bike. Then let's do that. Even though you may be a weaker swimmer and a weaker runner, if you want to spend those 2 to 3 months just hammering it on the bike because you love it, then
true.
I say go with that, because that fitness is going to carry over when things do start. So when the training plan really starts up, you've already accumulated a ton of bike fitness. So that may mean that we have to spend less time focusing on building bike fitness when the training plan starts. We just have to focus on maintaining it. And then we can really spend the time that we would have spent like on the bike and maybe allocate it more to the swim and the run, at that point in time. Because, you tend to be more willing to do those things that you don't typically enjoy when there's already a race on the calendar, you have a goal that you're working towards, and it's kind of like, I just got to check this box and get it done. Wintertime tends to be the time where you don't think that way. And so it might be best to just find that one activity that you really love and then just end up doing that. Even though it might not be your weakness, if you can find something that keeps you motivated and keeps you engaged during the challenging weather conditions, and you can get outside less and all that kind of stuff. But if you say, hey, if I really enjoy mountain biking, then roll with that. It's going to help improve bike handling skills, your time in the saddle. The stuff still carries over, even though it may not be directly applicable to if we say that now we're going to start triathlon season, we're not going to be on the mountain bike, but the stuff is still relevant. Cycling is still cycling to a certain extent. You've still built fitness, you've built strength and all that time, and that stuff matters.
That makes sense. Because I think that's what I would probably be like, oh, I probably need to work on my swim, but that is a very hard, that is,
I really don't want
but I
to.
really don't want to. And then I'm like miserable. And I
Yeah.
want to have this
Who
time,
wants to do that?
to do something fun. That's why I like this time of year to do the strength training, because I have the strength equipment. I'm lucky enough to have this at home. So if the weather is just really terrible or extremely windy, I have some equipment at home and I can do the strength training, and I could put on a podcast or listen to music, and it's just nice because it's like I could do it here and and listen to something and just and maybe sip some coffee or I don't know, whatever in between my sets,
Yeah.
because it's a little bit more relaxed, and I as a runner I have a tendency to want to just like zoom through each, especially when I'm doing the heavy things, and you're supposed to take 2 minutes of rest between, and that is like really hard for me, but I'm like, oh, I got to rest, and there's actually something kind of freeing about that when you're so used to like, having to go, push it so hard. So, and then, I'll also do things in this time of year because the treadmill, and the weather's terrible and the treadmill is like not fun. And I'll do something similar to maybe like the high rocks, but I'll put the treadmill at a grade of like 5% or more and run for half a mile and do kind of like these interval things where I'll kind of do like a tempo and then get
Yeah.
off and then maybe do my rowing machine for a little bit and then get on and then do like something maybe like kettlebell swings or burpees or something, kind of like I'll just kind of do this thing where I rotate through, and so it's almost like I'm doing these intervals and I have the treadmill up, and it really makes it interesting, and then it breaks it up a little bit so I'm not so bored on the treadmill, which it can happen. The treadmill's tough for a lot of people. So I think just like things like that in the base training where, yeah, I mean, maybe that's not ideal when you're in the middle of your season, but I think you're still building fitness and maybe a little bit of strength in there, especially if you do something in between that has a little bit of a cardio component, and then you get back on and you're keeping that heart rate up a little bit. You're maybe having a little bit of rest. Maybe you take the treadmill down for a minute and then you sort of bring it back up, to whatever percent grade, and then you stay steady there. Then you get off, you do your thing, and then you kind of rest, and then you do it again. However you want to build it in, but I think to find ways to make it interesting and deal with sometimes the negatives of like the bad weather and, I don't know. Sometimes I think it's even fun to go out in like a snowstorm. And I know I'm not going to go fast. I just go run
Yeah.
and plod along and when, listen to David Goggins and think to myself, like, I'm tough, you know what I mean? I don't know, like, but then I come back and I'm like, that was so refreshing. And not people are probably going to be like, God, she's crazy. But, I feel like it's just that time of year. Like, I know I'm not going to be able to go fast and the snow is, I'm plodding along and the snow's accumulating but it's just nice to get outside and get some fresh air. I don't know, it's like just not the time maybe to be like focusing so much on, speed if, outside and running like a fast track workout or something. But I think just to get out and do something and kind of have fun with it, roll with the weather. And, that's where maybe some flexibility is nice because you don't need to have a rigid plan. You can kind of be like, oh, well, today's crappy. I'm going to kind of switch gears and I'm going to run outside, but it's just going to be plodding along in the snow. So I think that's kind of the nice thing about the base season and off season is you can kind of make it like fun a little bit, like change it up, do something fitness but wise, but it doesn't have to be like rigid. And then when you get to your training plan and your training, like, yes, you want those workouts to kind of go as they're intended to, but
Yeah.
if you're doing that all year long, I think that can get tough, kind of, or you don't have any flexibility for weather or something like that, then you're kind of like, well, how am I going to get my workout in? And I hate the treadmill, so just something I would advise people to kind of think about. And I know you're very much a planner. I don't know if that makes you like
Yeah.
nervous, like, oh, I don't know if I
It does.
could.
It does. I admit.
Like, how about your
You
athletes?
you
Like,
can
what if like, I'm curious when you're working with people, like, do you ever do you build? I mean, because I'm thinking of that one person, like, when they want, oh, I just want to kind of have it be up in the air. Are you putting workouts in and then they get to decide what day like, how is that being structured for that
Yeah.
person? Like,
What I do is I just have there's in Training Peaks there's the custom profile, and I just say, it's a custom workout, 45 minutes to 60 minutes, and I put the guidelines in the workout. I say, if this is a run no more than this number of minutes. If this is a bike, you can bike as long as you want. If it's a swim, you can swim as long as you want. If it's a hike, these are the limits, or this is what I would recommend. Find a hilly route and do that. So that's kind of the way that I do is I won't put in like structured workouts. I'll just throw in like a placeholder, and then within the description, I'll set the guidelines. I set the guardrails for what I would suggest that they do.
okay, I see.
It helps protect the athlete against themselves because, they may say, hey, today I'm feeling great, so I'm going to go out and I'm going to run, 13 miles where the longest run that they've done is 6. That's a really bad decision. And so I kind of like, I rein them in a little bit, but yet I give them the freedom to say, hey, if you want to run today, great, but just don't run more than this,
Okay. You kind of give,
or
yeah,
that.
that makes sense. So you kind of give them,
So that's how I handle
right.
that. I can honestly say when I saw the text message come in and say, hey, I want an open plan, it really I don't like it.
Right.
I'll be honest with you. I was just like, oh man, come on. No, we don't want that. But I've been doing this long enough now to where, I've been trying to teach myself that not everybody is like me. Even though I don't like that structure, if this is something that this athlete needs in order to keep them fresh, to keep them motivated, and they just say, hey, I just need a little mental unwind for a little bit, and I want a little bit of freedom, then by all means, if that's what they need, it's my job to give it to them. It's not my job to keep them motivated when they don't have motivation.
Right.
That's not our job as a coach. Our job as a coach is to support them, to guide them, and to give them a path forward. It's their job to find the motivation. It's their job to find the why, and it's their job to tick the box.
Right. I do agree.
But
I think sometimes we do have
so
to, I feel like as coaches, we do have to encourage a little bit. And I think that is a conversation I often have with people is, so what like, why? Like, give me your why. Like, what's the, and not just like you want to complete this, but like, is there something really like setting you on fire? Like, what's giving you that, like, when you have to wake up at 5 in the morning or whatever it is to go do the training session, what's going to get you out of bed? Like, what's going to be like, I got to get up and do this, you know? And I do have those types of conversations with people because I'm just trying to kind of I want to know a little bit ahead of time, like what their motivations are. Cause I do think as a coach, if
Yeah.
they're just motivated by something kind of superficial, and this is also for people I work with in nutrition, like it's just, oh, I just want to lose weight. Like, why? Because that's not going to get you too far if that's all your goal is. Like, but the why is it because you want to be able to play with your grandkids, whatever it is. But like, I think as coaches, asking those questions is important, and that's kind of a different maybe topic. But I think in the off season too, just kind of like maybe revisiting. Obviously, for runners, I think this is a bigger problem for marathoners. Is grandmas as an example. Like it's. I think it was a matter of days, maybe hours, that the race filled up. Right. So you're thinking, if you want to run this race, you got to be thinking ahead, and that's tough for me because I'm like, I'm not sure. Like, I don't think I want to do a marathon, but I don't know for sure. But I better be sure because otherwise, I'm not gonna be able to do this race. And same with like Chicago. I think the Chicago Marathon just finished and they're opening the Chicago Marathon, whatever it is,
The lottery.
lottery that, or,
Yeah.
in some people, I think can sign up with the time, but you then have to like try to get in the lottery or try to sign up now, soon, within the next couple of weeks. I think it opens up and then it closes in November sometime. And you have to know you want to do that race almost a year in advance. So I think that's not necessarily always the case with some of the triathlons and other marathons, like lesser known, more like low key marathons are a little bit different, but that's a little bit challenging because I think it's also kind of just having that conversation with the athlete. Maybe they already know, like, because they have to sign up that early, like, so they have something signed up for already. But some athletes at this time of year aren't even in that space yet. But I think it's a good time to kind of be thinking about it, not necessarily signing up, but just kind of like starting to get the ball rolling a little bit on the head going a little bit on what is it, what do you think you want to do, you don't have to think about it, you don't have to sign up, you don't have to like commit to it now. But I think that kind of helps motivate a little bit to start that like process of thinking about it. Or is there some fun fall, like, there's a lot of times like 5Ks and different little things you can do over the holidays. Like, can you sign up for that and just kind of have fun with it? Don't take it too seriously. Maybe go out and do that turkey trot or that, I don't know, Santa chase, whatever, that's also kind of, I think, a fun way to sort of just keep motivated and keep doing something because you have something on the schedule, but it's not a serious race. It's kind of fun. You could even dress up if you wanted and run. And that would make it maybe more fun. And so like I think, but kind of thinking like, okay, what's going to keep me motivated? What's going to keep me going so I don't completely just stop? Because I
Yeah.
think that's a problem with having no plan. We're just having such an open plan, is that I think sometimes this time of year with stress and everything going on with the holidays, it's easy to sort of be like, oh, I'll do my workout tomorrow or do something tomorrow. And then it's a week later. So I think that's what for some of my athletes, it's like I've had some conversations like, what do you think you might want to do next year? Like, just start kind of thinking about it, and you don't have to commit, but it's kind of good to sort of, you might want to really have a plan set in January, but for now, just think about it and maybe just sign up for some fun things that you can do in the
Yeah.
meantime that, just keep you in the holiday spirit. That's what I'm doing. I'm doing both the turkey trot and I, as long as the weather commits, I think I'm going to do like a 10K, like Santa, some sort of, I don't know, Santa catch thing. I don't know what it is called, but
Yeah.
you know,
Usually I'll have that conversation with my athletes, or I'll send out like an email to them and say, and it's right around like November,
it's a good
kind
time.
of like
Yeah.
towards like mid to late November. It's like, hey, now is the time to start thinking about some goals that you would like to adopt. We don't have to come up with a race list or anything. It's like, hey, I'm going to do this, this, and this. But now is a good time. I just want to plant the seed and say, hey, what are some things that you would like to achieve in the next 12 or so months, and let's put some foundation to it. If that means that, hey, if I'm working with a triathlete, I may say, what are 3 things, one for each discipline, that you would like to achieve by the end of the year to where you would feel like you had a successful year? If there's something, swimming related, I want to be able to swim, a 3K swim without stopping, in open water or in the pool, but that's the goal that I've got. For cycling, I would like to be able to, do this, increase my FTP by 5%, or, I would like to be able to run a half marathon under this time, so it's just something just to kind of like start laying the foundation. So then I have an idea how to kind of structure their plan going forward to give them the best opportunity to achieve those goals. I can't say that whatever I'm planning in December is going to, guarantee that they achieve that. But I have an idea on, okay, if they really want this kind of goal for running, then that tells me, okay, well, I need to focus a lot more on running than on the other sports. I think a general rule of thumb for off-season kind of training is if you're looking to gain fitness in a particular discipline, you need to be doing that discipline more days than you're not. So if that means that you want to improve running, you need to be running a minimum of 4 days a week, 4 days out of 7 days of the week. If you say, I would just like to maintain fitness, then I would say 3 days a week is a reasonable approach. If you say, I'm willing to sacrifice and see a little degradation in my fitness, then you can go 2 to 1 day. I typically, I would then question, it's like, okay, we're not doing 1 day, because then that's just not worth
It's like,
it's very little value to it at all. I'd rather say, okay, we're either doing it twice a week, we're doing it 3 days a week, or we're doing it 4 or more days per week. So I think that's a good general rule of thumb. So it's like, hey, I want to get stronger on the bike, then you need to be riding on that bike 4 days or more.
Yeah, I also wonder,
So-
like we're talking a lot about people who want to improve something, but what if, like, I'm sure there are people who are like, I don't really have anything I want to, that maybe they are truly very burnt out and they're like, I just want to maintain my fitness. I don't, I don't want to work on, I just want to maintain some fitness, and then maybe hopefully get some motivation to go. I think that's a good idea. Then it's like, okay, can you just run 3 or 4 days a week? Because maybe you've been running 7, or you've been doing this high volume in a marathon build or something, and it's like, yeah, you might need a break. And I don't think, yeah, take your 2 weeks off, take a little time off. But if you just decide you're going to take 2 months off, like we said in the beginning, that's going to really degrade your fitness. And then when you want to get back into it, you're almost building from square one in a way. I mean, you do have, if you've been running for years, there's something to be said for that. It's not like you're coming back from total scratch, but it does going to take a lot more work to kind of get back to where you want to be. So if you can truly, if you're just like, I just want to maintain, like, I can't focus on anything else, it's just too much, I'm so burnt out, or I really need some time. Like, I do think that's a really good option to just say, I'm just going to focus on this, minimum 2 days a week. And if you're a triathlete, maybe that's just 2 days of, you're just sort of doing a little bit, like couple days of biking, couple running, however that builds in, to kind of just be able to maintain some of those sports. I think it's a little harder as a triathlete because you have the 3 disciplines. So as a runner, it's easier because you just run 3 days a week, and then maybe you have some flexibility in between to do some other stuff or nothing. But I do think that's an option, and I don't want people to think that they always have to be working on something. I mean, I think that's a great way to go about it, but if you're truly like, I just am done, I need time. I don't think taking time off completely is great unless you're obviously injured or something. But I do think it's okay to just be, I'm just running 3, 4 days a week and that's it. And I think that's okay. And you will maintain fitness, as long as you're not just running 1 mile, but maybe doing, like you said, okay, maybe let's just try 20 miles a week. That's a pretty good mile. I think personally, that's a good amount of mileage to maintain fitness. I think anything less than that is not great. Like, it's probably, you could maybe do a little bit less and be okay if you're a seasoned athlete. But I think 20, I would say around minimum 15, but definitely around 20 miles a week is a good place to be if that's, you just want to maintain. You might lose a little bit of speed, but it'd be easy to pick it up once you get going. And that's my suggestion. And maybe break it up, roughly 5 miles each time. If it's somebody that, I think some runners can handle one longer day. Like if they wanted to do a 10-mile day, if they're a marathoner and they're just wanting to maintain one longer day. So when they do start training again, they can, build build that up a little bit, I think that's okay. If you're someone that's been running for a bit and you're a bit more of experienced runner, whereas I don't know if you're only running 2 days a week, like you said, I don't know if having one of those days be, like, really long is gonna be the best approach. I'd rather somebody split it up into 4 days, of 5 miles versus, like, 1 to 10 mile and 2 5 or, like, or 15 miler to 5 miler or something like that. I don't know if that's the best distribution. I'd rather see more frequent running. But yes, I think that's an option, and I just wanna throw that out there because I think you don't always have to be improving. You can just maintain in this
Yeah.
off season, and then I think like there's a little bit of a difference there. But you have this off season where you're doing, you're focusing on a weakness or you're just maintaining, and then the base, and then you kind of go into like more of a base training, and sometimes there's a little bit of an overlap there, and that's I think almost like a different topic because that is a different phase, right? So I think we're kind of predominantly just talking about the off season or the in between season. Is that right? Are we talking?
I would think that that's a
Yeah.
fair assessment. I mean, when I think of base training, I think that if I'm working with a triathlete, then base training means that we are doing at least swim, bike, and run, and probably some strength. So those are the four things that I would say that's part of the base training. If we're talking about off season, then we may not be doing all four of those. We may say, hey, I'm going to focus on these two. We're going to do cycling and we're going to do strength work. That might be kind of the off season. If the athlete is willing to lose fitness in the other things that we're not going to be doing, that's the key, is you have to be willing to lose that fitness, knowing that it does come back. And the more seasoned you are and the longer that you've been at this, the quicker it comes back. But, for a new athlete, I may caution them and say, hey, you're really new to the sport. I don't recommend taking that much time off on this particular discipline because it's going to take a lot of work to get back what you're going to lose. That would be my advice to them. So it really depends, how long you've been doing this, might dictate how you approach your off season. So how much of an experienced athlete that you are. One thing that I would also like to say is that if you do want to take time off to where you do absolutely nothing, which is reasonable depending on how your training went throughout the year, I would put a time frame on it. Don't leave it
Yeah, that's a good
open-ended.
point because it could
I
just
would
roll and
say,
roll, and all of a sudden it's
it has a tendency to gain momentum. And then by the time that you notice what's going on, it's February and March. And now all of a sudden you have a June race that you have to prepare for, and you are way behind the eight ball. So I would say, hey, if we're taking time off, this is the time that I recommend you take it off. This is, if we're going to take it off, let's take it off in December. And we're going to take off just 2 weeks and then keep it at that. And, once we get to the end of the 2 weeks, we'll start to throw in some workouts, and then I'll check in with them. It's like, hey, how are you feeling now that we're back to some structured training? If they tell me I am on the struggle bus, seriously, I'm hating this, then that tells me that maybe I need to have a different approach to bring them back to structured training. Or I can say, well, then if it's this bad, then let's take
week.
another week and then go week by week.
Yeah.
Don't allow, and then say, but this week to week thing is going to end, mid-January.
Because if
After
you want
that,
to do this race,
we
you've
really
got
got to get back to
yeah.
work.
And hopefully by then, if
So
they've had that
I
much time
yeah.
off, they're
Usually they're biting
Yeah,
at the bit to like get back to it because they've spent enough time off. They kind of miss the structure a little bit. And, if they're that A-type personality, then,
yeah. I mean,
then they're definitely biting at it. And then I think that that's a fantastic situation to be in because you're highly motivated, you're highly engaged,
you're ready to go.
and you're ready to work.
Absolutely. You don't want to. Yeah, you want to go into it.
When I have to pull an athlete into training, then that tells me, A, they're not ready for it. It's going to be really hard for me to keep them engaged and motivated. And this training is going to be more of a struggle than what it has to be.
And I mean,
and it's my job as a coach to listen to that.
Absolutely, to kind of check in. And I think some people kind of start that way, And then once they get going and the structure is there, but often that's why it is important to kind of check in with people kind of, week to week and just kind of see where they're at. Because I mean, I've been there sometimes where I'm like, "Oh, okay, I got it. It's because the weather or whatever, that time of year is just hard and I'm just struggling. But then once I kind of get the routine back in, and then the ball just starts getting going, and I'm like, and the weather starts to improve in the spring, and I'm like, okay, I feel good. So it can be a variety of factors, but I do think that's why it's so important to kind of check in with people and sort of see where they're at, and then give them more time off, or even reevaluate their goals if needed. I mean, there's only, truly, if we're truly burnt out, if somebody's truly burning out, not necessarily overtraining, they're just like burned out. I think that's where I, as a coach, kind of have to would have to reevaluate, like, okay, like, did I overdo something in the training, or was there life? I mean, people have life stuff that also comes in the to the table, like job things and other things that can kind of lead to burnout. But I do think that's always something we want to assess. Is there like some burnout here? And I've been there before with running. I mean, I've taken time off from running in my past 30 years of running where I didn't run because of burnout. So I know what that's like. Luckily, I've always been able to find my way back. But it's kind of, I think that is why it's important to have these off-season time frames too. If we're just going in the next race and we're training, and there's always like a big race on the docket and always something that we're training for, we're just going through the marathon grind after marathon grind, and we're not giving ourselves that time. I think that's where burnout usually happens. So I actually think, this whole off-season topic is great, because I actually do think it's important to have sort of that time, that sort of off-season time, to sort of build up some of your weaknesses, or focus on something a little bit different, or do something fun but keep up with the fitness, or just maintain fitness but allow yourself to do other things in life. Maybe focus on, the holidays, or which are always stressful anyways, or something with your kids, or something with your job that you aren't able to focus on as much. And it's okay. And then I think when you do get back to it, you'll be amped up, ready to go. But if we don't allow ourselves those sort of off-season times, or those in between kind of more relaxed times in our training, I do think it that's where I think people tend to have true burnout. And so I do caution people. I think the type A too, there's this tendency to want to just kind of grind, like, let's get into the next one. I finished. Now let's do this. Like, I'm doing another marathon, and I've had to pull myself back a little bit from that too. Like, okay, I'm going to do another one this fall, like after my spring marathon. And it's like, no, I'm going to focus on something different. And then I am going to take some time here in November, December, to really focus on some other fun things, and then get back to it. And I think I'll be able to get my goal next year, as long as I stay healthy, because of it. So I also want to put that out there, that I don't think the off season or that time is necessarily optional. I think I think it should be part of everyone's schedule, if they're, serious, like, seriously training for something anyway. So that's my 2 cents.
I admit, I'm guilty of that, to not taking the break, not taking that quote unquote off season, because once I finish my race, then I'm just like, okay, what's next? I mean, that's just my personality, and I think it's led me to some overuse injuries. I think I don't think this has really led me to a whole lot of burnout, because I enjoy the journey, but it has led to overuse injuries because I'm not allowing time to deload. And so that's something that I committed to when I signed up for Florida, that I said, I'm forcing myself to take 2 weeks. I'm committing to it. I really just hate saying it right now, actually. I'm taking, 1 to 2 weeks off from structured training, and I'm either going to have some rest days in there, or I'm just going to do some low impact stuff. Maybe I'll get on the elliptical, maybe I'll just kind of get on the treadmill and just walk, that kind of stuff, or go out and hit the trails at the park and just, hike on the trails, but do something. And I'm forcing it because it's not my personality to do it willingly. And so you've heard it here on episode 36, that I'm forcing myself 1 to 2 weeks off after Florida.
Yeah, you need to take that time. I'm going to force you to do it. I'm going to check in with you and be like, you better be not doing something
Yeah.
structured. I don't have a problem with I don't, like, wanna force people not to move at all, but it's like, yeah, you need some time where there's no structure, like, or at
Yeah.
least very little, and you're allowing yourself some rest days too, which I think is vital.
So one thing that I do want to say is like when you decide to start back, if you say, okay, now I've deloaded, I've taken the time off that I really wanted to take off, and I'm feeling excited and motivated, I'm ready to train. This is probably one of the most riskiest times in the athlete's journey is when they're highly motivated and they're starting the training, because they typically will come from something that is non-structured or really low volume, and then because of the excitement, they ramp up really
Mm,
quickly. And it's like a rocket that just shoots off. And what happens is that the body's not used to it. And then all of a sudden, now I can't figure out, why am I getting shin splints? Or, why is my low back tight all the time now? And, I've got my glutes are really tight, and my high hamstring tightness, and it hurts to bend over, and, that kind of stuff. So what I would suggest then is, if you are not being actively coached by someone and you are doing your own training plan, whatever training plan that you pick from, whether you come up with it or you find something online or chat GPT, or God, I hate saying that really, but anyway, whatever it is that you pick from, I would say automatically right off the bat, deduct 25% of the volume that is in that plan and go with 75% of what the plan says and start there. This way, it allows your body to ease into the training, and you can always ramp up. What you can't do is go guns blazing, and then you're going to be forced to take a slower approach because something has happened. I would much rather be under that first scenario where it's like, hey, if we were a little bit conservative at the start, the body's absorbing it, everything seems to be going well. Let's ramp up a
I think that's
little
where
bit,
that base
and let's start to
training piece
roll this
comes
up.
in. It's like that's the piece
Yeah,
where now you're getting back, you're taking the off season sort of time, and now you're ramping into training. It's that phase, that's that base training. I think
yes,
people
that's the
should,
base
before
phase.
they start, because a lot of those online training plans are like a 12-week plan. That's really for people once they are ready to start their training plan, right? The base training is to help people
Yeah,
ramp up from there. And so I think, I think that's a great option, like you're mentioning, taking a plan and then just doing like 75% of it, or kind of slowly ramping into it and using that plan, but maybe not structuring it exactly as it says. And then once you kind of have 12 weeks out, then you should be ready to start the actual plan maybe. But there's some
yeah,
like, during that base training, you're maybe ramping up volume a little bit, but maybe the intensity, kind of depends on the race. So there's a little bit of nuance. I mean, that maybe is another topic too, of just like base training, which most people probably won't be starting until the new year anyway. But it's that, what do you do? How do you think about base training, and what is that? Because that's, in my opinion, sort of the off ramp from the off season. And maybe some of what I'm doing is base. I could think of like the strengthening is kind of like foundational base building, but the actual running piece where I'm going to be ramping up my training is where really I kind of think that's more of like the base phase, which for me will start kind of end of January, into February. That's so, yeah, I think that's almost like a separate thing. It's like that topic self, I think we could maybe cover a little bit in its own, is just like, how would you think about that, and how do you maybe structure that piece a little bit more depending on what you're training for. I don't know if that sounds
yeah.
good.
I
Yeah.
honestly, I think that this episode is more geared to, maybe we should retitle it and just
Maybe
call
off
it
season. Yeah, off
off-season
season.
training, because I think base training has a very
Mhm.
specific purpose to it. And I think there's two kinds of base training. There's base training for like overall fitness, and then there's base training for sport-specific
That's right. Yeah.
fitness. And so I think that, it depends on what kind of base training we're talking about. Off-season may be a good time to work on building a base of your overall fitness.
Or
Um,
foundation or
and
strength
then once, yeah, foundational
foundation,
kind
like,
of stuff is
and
where, I
then,
would
yeah, then you kind
characterize
of
that.
build in, more of the specific stuff with the base,
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think that would be, like, maybe another follow-up at some point we could do, you know, because I think people right now, or most people, many people, not everybody, but a lot of people are kind of into their finishing up their fall marathon or their fall race, and they're kind of in that phase of off season, or they're going to be there. And then, for many people, it's kind of around January, February where they're thinking about base training. But it kind of depends on where people live. It's trying to do it in a timely way, but a lot of people, some people in Florida are probably just gearing up for their season. I don't know, because that's
Yeah,
a different.
that is an interesting point, though. It's like if you live in an area where it's a temperate climate and you really don't have a whole lot of like season, it never really gets cold, then you really have to kind of think about, okay, what do I really consider to be my off season? Whether it's because races can happen all year round because of the climate that you live in. I mean,
yeah, it's temperate.
It's kind of hard for me to talk about, off season training when I'm only like 50% through
right,
my training plan for a race.
You're
that's
you're
in
like,
mid-December.
I still have a long time to go, and
I still have a
whereas
long
I'm
way to
in
go,
that
but
phase kind of like I just did that 5K was kind of my big last one that I had on my calendar. That was kind of important. And now I'm maybe going to dabble in a few races, but it's now just a lot of strength stuff. I've already started building in some strength already, but it's like, okay, now I'm really going to focus on that and just doing some fun things. So yeah, you're in a different stage than I am, but that's okay because I think everybody's sort of, a lot of people would, are in that phase like you are too. So they're maybe they can wait and listen to this when they're done with their come back to it later. But yeah, I know you have to head out. You've got your dinner reservations. I want to make sure you better go to that. But I think we've covered a good amount on the off season. I think we've covered it pretty well. I can't think of anything else necessarily I would want to add. But yeah, we'll cover base training another time. And yeah, I don't know. I think I'm getting tired.
Yeah, it might be a whole series that we can come up with. Like, this is the off season training, and then we dedicate an episode to this is what base training looks like. This is what peak training looks like, and this is what taper training.
We talked about the taper a little bit,
like that.
Yeah,
we did have a taper episode, but
something we can maybe revisit.
It's also one of those topics that it's nice to talk about again because it's really it's hard to do well.
Yeah. It is hard to do well.
I think it is for some.
For many reasons, it's just hard it's hard because you're just trying to get everything lined up perfectly for that one day.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely something we can revisit. But I think definitely base training, definitely peak training, kind of how to structure that or some ideas or thoughts around that. I think that's great. And we'll kind of probably build this in where throughout the year. Won't be like structured sequentially because we have like some other topics that we're gonna have in, but so it'll come along eventually. But
yep, we're not there yet. So if we talk about peak training right now in October, it might fall on deaf ears because it's like, oh well, I'm not there yet.
Exactly.
So
I think that's something
really
we talk
relevant,
maybe more in the new year later on. But yeah, we'll build it in. But yeah, I think that's good. I'm starting to fade a little bit. I have to be honest. My days, I was up early. I did all that stuff and I'm like kind of hungry now. And I'm like ready to call it.
Yeah. I think the caffeine is waning in me too.
Whatever.
I ingested a lot of it during training
caffeine
today.
Left.
So
it's just mostly like the fumes, the adrenaline fumes. And now I'm like it's wearing out. I can feel it. So it's a good time to end. But it's nice to see you.
All right, guys. Yeah, so I want to thank you guys for joining us, and this was episode 36 of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. I'm your host, Coach Justin, along with Coach Katie. Thank you guys, and we will talk to you again next week.
Yeah.
All right, Katie.
You too. Bye,
have
Justin.
a good night. All right. Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. Like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. Feel free to leave us up to a 5-star review on iTunes and Spotify because leaving a review really helps others like you find us. Visit the podcast website for other episodes of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast at enduranceathletejourney.buzzsprout.com. Have questions or comments about the podcast? send Coach Justin and Katie an email at theenduranceathletejourney@gmail.com. For all things coaching, visit Coach Katie at fuel2run.com and Coach Justin at tabularasaracing.com. Again, thank you for listening to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast, and remember to find joy in the journey.